Welcome all. This is Simon Rosenberg from Hopium Chronicles. This is our monthly or so showing of our signature presentation here called With Democrats, Things Get Better. This is a presentation that I've been showing in one form or another for about 6 years now. And it's new and fresh every time. So even if you've seen it before, there'll be new stuff in here today. And I did put a bunch of new economic data in here today, which I'm happy with. So let's get going, okay? So first of all of you know that I've closed the organization that I ran for many years called NDN. We're now working out of here at Hopium Chronicles on Substack. Been really excited about what we've been able to build here. Love the work we're doing together. If you haven't checked it out, the water's warm. Come by and see us. My top line message to all of you today is that before, just to address the political moment, is that if there's one thing I can leave you with about where we are in 2023, is that Joe Biden's a good president, the country is better off, the Democratic Party is strong, and we keep winning elections all across the country, right? They have Trump and MAGA. And in every way possible, as we head into 2024, I would much rather be us than them. But the story that we're going to spend time with today begins in 1989. It's my belief that to understand the current day of American politics, we need to go back to this critical moment when the Cold War ended, communism fell, and a new global order began, where the entire world started to get stitched together into one single global American system. Up until that point, the communist world, the non-aligned world, had not really been part of the economic order the United States had started to build after the end of World War II. But then we began to see the world coming together around a single global system. It was very much the idea that FDR had all the way back in the 1940s starting to become true, more true than it had ever been. And during this time, since 1989, we've seen so much change, right? We've seen globalization itself spread across the world. The internet was invented. Climate change emerged as a huge challenge. Putin's insurgency against the West and the challenges we're facing in Ukraine, the rise of MAGA and right-wing politics here. There's been incredible biomedical advances. We've had 9/11, the war on terror, endless wars in Middle East, which is a little bit more relevant today than it was even a few weeks ago. We've had COVID. This has been a time of remarkable change and transformation. It's my view that one of the ways that we really have to look at American politics today is to look at it through this question of who has managed well against all that change. For anyone who's run an organization or been in the leadership of an organization, you know that managing against change is one of our greatest collective challenges whenever you run something. And I think it's a fair way to look to frame a discussion around how the two parties responded to these dramatic changes after the Cold War ended. And what you're going to see today is there's been one party that's responded very well and another party that hasn't. And so, for example, this is job growth creation, over time, over the last 6 presidencies. There have been, I should say at the beginning, there have been 6 presidents since 1989, 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats. It's been almost 19 years of Democrats, 16 years of Republicans. And so almost the same, right? Almost the same. We've had a few more years, but it's about the same. And you've seen that every Democratic president has seen robust job growth on their watch. The Republicans haven't. We saw, when I started this presentation prior to the Biden presidency, I talked about how there had been, in the 16 years of Clinton and Obama versus the 16 years of Bush and Trump, same years, right? Same amount of years. There had been 17 times more jobs created in those equivalent 16 years. So lots of Dem jobs, not so many Republican jobs. And then we've seen Biden has seen the greatest job creation rate of arguably any president in American history during his presidency, to add to this big lead. And when you break it down by month, I've always found this to be a very stark graph, because it shows that Republicans averaged 10,000 jobs created a month over 16 years. That's 120,000 or so a year. An average month during this period was in 180, 200,000. And under Biden, we've been averaging 434,000 a month. And so a year of job growth under, the average month of Biden's presidency is 3.5 years, 4 years of job growth under Republicans, an entire presidential term, basically. So really stark way to, to sort of present this. And we've seen the unemployment rate, go up under Republicans, go down under Democrats repeatedly, significantly so, right? And this is sort of the killer graph of the whole presentation, which is that there have been 50 million jobs created in America since 1989. 48 million of those have been created under Democratic presidents, 96%, basically all of them. And so part of the basic orientation of this presentation is that there's been one party that has contributed to move America forward and another party that's repeatedly failed to do its part. And I think that that's a fair assessment of American history since 1989. I'm going to show a few more graphs that tell this story in different ways. GDP growth, which is one of those measures Republicans really care about. Biden is 3 times what Trump's GDP growth was, and certainly above both the two Bushes, despite war in Ukraine and high gas prices and global inflation and supply chain issues. Remarkable performance of the American economy. And during this period, since 1989, we've also seen an explosion of wealth created in America. Our companies were very well positioned to take advantage of going from 1.5 billion or 2 billion customers to 7 billion customers. We continue to lead the world in virtually every sector, but with no one even being remotely close to us at this point. And because of that, our equity soared. People around the world, as more wealth was created, bought our companies because they were really successful and really valuable. And we've seen, this growth of the stock market since 1989. I should note that I forgot to update the stock market slides. I apologize. Today, the Dow's, I think, 33,600, something like that. So it's a little bit lower than this slide. But this shows you that under Democratic presidents, we saw a huge increase in wealth in America, stock wealth in America. And I just want to be clear about this, is that the Dow has gone up 17-fold, right, during this time. Just an incredible sign of the success and vitality of our corporate America here and around the world. And again, most of the growth of the stock market during this period happened under Clinton and Obama. Biden's got some work to do here, but the rest of his economic achievements have been remarkable. He's been not as far ahead in the growth of the stock market, but we've seen enormous wealth creation. And this is all good, right? Wealth creation is good. It's what gives us power and strength in the world and also creates opportunity for our people to get ahead. And we know that for Democrats, we just don't care about the aggregate wealth. We care about how it's distributed. And, workers have not gained 17-fold since 1989. People with real estate and stocks gained much more, but workers have gotten ahead. I mean, this notion in America that, wages and incomes have flatlined or declined is just false. And it's a false meme. It's a false understanding of what's happened. I mean, what's happened is that workers' wages and incomes haven't kept up with the incomes of people who had investment in real estate and stocks, but that doesn't mean they haven't gotten ahead. And this is really important, right? And this is another way of cutting it. I need to update this slide because there's some new data on this. And it's really important to see that median income has not been flat since the 1980s. It's actually gone up a lot under Democrats, didn't go up too much under the Bush, actually went down under the Bush presidencies. This is not a flat line, and any attempt to create the notion that there's a flat line, that we have flat line in wages and incomes, takes away the success of Democrats and obscures the failures of the Republicans. And so we shouldn't be talking about it that way, because first of all, it's not true. This is not a flat line. And second of all, it obscures the success of our Democratic presidents. And even on the deficit, which is an area of enormous contention, obviously, it tells a similar story that the deficit's gone up under Republicans, it's gone way down under Democrats. In Clinton, we actually got to surplus. I mean, if Bush had left in place the fiscal budget that he was given when he came into office in 2001, our entire national debt would have been erased by 2010 because we were running such significant surpluses under. But the Republicans they're not a party of fiscal responsibility, right? They create big deficits, we make them smaller. This is very relevant to the current moment in America. And I just show this because this is the deficit as a percentage of the gross domestic product, GDP. And it just shows what happened under Trump, that there was just this explosion of debt under Trump, as there was under Bush, as there was under the previous Bush, as there was under Reagan, right? I mean, it's a little bit hard to see all that. But it's been the Democrats who've had to come in and clean up the fiscal mess left by Republicans before them. This is a massive myth buster, right? I mean, this idea that the Republicans are good on the economy, well, that's not true, right? The idea that Republicans are good, fiscally responsible, well, we also showed that's not true. I mean, these are kind of red wavy notions that exist in our daily discourse, which are false. And what's also important to recognize is that we're going to hear a lot of this now in the discussion of Ukraine, is Republicans' basic argument about Ukraine is we shouldn't be spending money abroad, we should be spending it here at home. You know, and of course, our response is, well, hey, that's great. You know, we've just made the biggest domestic investments in America since the 1960s. And of course, the Republican response is that, well, we have to cut all that by 20, 30%. I mean, it's beyond parody, the way that they talk about the economy. I mean, the lack of intellectual rigor, the lack of economic literacy, you know, in the Republican Party it's stunning. It's actually stunning. And it's something we can talk about in the Q&A. So let's talk a little bit now about Biden's presidency and today. And one of the clear takeaways is that the American can-do spirit is alive and well. You know, we have had the best economic recovery from COVID of any G7 nation, a remarkable achievement for the United States. We've actually seen in recent months, the lowest peacetime unemployment rate since World War II. And the lowest unemployment rate since the 1960s. It means that about 2/3 of Americans today have never lived in an America where the unemployment rate has been so low in their lifetime. And so a remarkable thing. We also just got new data yesterday from the Fed, which is kind of stunning, which is this is the increase in median net worth, inflation adjusted. And from 2019 to 2022, the typical person saw their median wealth go up by 37%, from 141,000 to 193,000. And look at the growth among young people. It's very significant. This data is starting to get cut, and we'll have more of this. But really, another sign of the tremendous American, the power of the economic engine in the United States and the resilience and grit of the American people, that even during a time of enormous challenge, we've seen incredible economic progress and success. We also, this is something that's getting more and more attention, as we're seeing an explosion of new business formation in the United States, entrepreneurship, super encouraging by any historical standard. And it is obviously, the more new businesses get started, the more dynamic the American economy is. And we just got data just in the last couple of days. Look at the graph on the right, the business ownership graph. Look at the bottom. That's the growth of Black and Hispanic business ownership in recent years. Skyrocketing, right? A lot of that new business formation that we're seeing is being driven by Black and Hispanic families. It's a really encouraging thing. And also look at stock ownership, right? If you look in the middle graph, you're seeing a big explosion in Black and Hispanic stock ownership, which is obviously important given how well assets have grown in America. So very encouraging data about how this is not all beneficial at the top, that people who we want to get into the middle class are being given more opportunity to do so. But it's through their grit and resilience, right? It's through their hard work and pluck and plum. The great American can-do spirit is alive and well. We also know that under Biden, that we've had the lowest uninsured rate in American history. It's come way down because of the ACA, an amazing societal achievement. And also, we had just recently, but no longer, we had the lowest poverty rate ever in American history, all under the Biden presidency. Oops, something happened there. And we know that the investments, these far-sighted investments that Biden has made, have begun to pay off. We're seeing an explosion in construction spending for manufacturing facilities around the United States. If you notice, this is a doubling of the annual expenditure just in a short period of time. These are building plants that are going to employ hundreds of thousands of Americans, maybe even millions, for years to come. And we know that one of my favorite stats is that we have had more job openings per unemployed persons than any time in American history. A few months ago, it was 2 job openings. It's now down to about 1.6. And this means that it's easier for people to find a job than it's been ever in American history. There's more job openings per unemployed persons, which is why we have to solve this through fixing and modernizing our immigration system rather than making loosening child labor laws that are putting 15-year-olds into chicken plants, on school nights, which is what's happening in Republican states all over the country. Inflation, big issue. Obviously, it's a global phenomenon, been driven by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, by OPEC continually raising prices, Saudi Arabia, Russia in particular, right? But now we've seen that inflation is really almost back down to pre-pandemic levels. It's very exciting, and very important. It's one of the reasons our economy is continuing to grow, because the increase in costs are coming down, right? And inflation is getting back to a very manageable place. Paul Krugman famously wrote a piece last week saying we've won the war against inflation. I'm not sure we're totally there yet, but he makes a powerful case. And keep in mind that our inflation rate here is significantly lower, but regardless of how you measure it, than the rest of the G7. So another example of how, despite troubles here and struggles here, still relative to other modern advanced economies, America's doing much better. This is wages, right? One of the reasons that inflation was not as big an issue for many workers in America as it was for some. I mean, if you drove a car, inflation was very highly concentrated in fuel and oil prices and gas prices. So if you drove a fuel inefficient car long distances every day, your economic life was really transformed in the last, during the wave of high inflation. For everybody else, inflation was not as intense because wages had gone up so much. And so the relative, and this is really important, wages are now beginning to come down, but you can see that wage growth in the last few years has been higher than it's been in a very long time, and which mitigated some of the impact of rising inflation. And we also know that the wage growth was heavily concentrated in the bottom 50%, bottom 25% of the American workforce. Again, super encouraging data. And this is a really important slide to me because it challenges this notion that everything is terrible, which is, this is a simple question. It's not a simple question, I should say. It's a complicated set of questions, but this particular version of it was, are you happy with your job, right? And we have higher job satisfaction rates right now than we've had since this survey began. I can show you other data that I wrote about last week that I haven't incorporated yet into this presentation, showing that people are overwhelmingly satisfied with their lives. They're overwhelmingly satisfied with their jobs. They're overwhelmingly satisfied with their pay at work. And this notion that everything is terrible is just, it's possible that we're just not asking all these questions properly, that like what Tom Bonnier and I did with the red wave, by sort of opening the aperture of the data that we were looking at and expanding the data sets that we were looking at, we came to a more holistic and more accurate understanding of the election. I think we need to do the same thing for the economy, because not all the data is pointing in the same direction. There's a lot of data showing enormous satisfaction with the American economy and with people's lives. There's other data showing the other way. And the thing is, if the data is not all pointing in the same direction, then you can't claim it's a trend, right? And I think that some ways, this notion that the economy is terrible and Biden's bad on the economy is this election cycle's red wave. It's false and wrong. And it's something that we need to challenge more aggressively. We also know that, in every measure of the advancement of clean energy here in America and around the world, we're starting to see real liftoff. It's incredibly exciting. It's going to lower costs and make us less fuel dependent upon, what are often not such great nations, right? And their willingness to manipulate prices against us. And we also know, and this is important for domestic discussion, is that one of the central Republican arguments against Biden is that he's waged this war on energy. And because of his war on energy, gas prices went up, which of course was ridiculous. And that, he's putting America at a disadvantage to the rest of the world. The truth is, more oil will be drilled and developed here in America this year, produced in America this year, than any year in American history. So we're producing more renewables, we're producing more of our own oil, we're exporting more gas than we've ever exported in American history. We are succeeding on all fronts on one of the central issues of our time, which is our energy destiny, where we're taking more and more control over our energy destiny. Is very exciting. And crime, this is another issue that's discussed and debated in our discourse every day. I don't think people really understand that violent crime rates in America, about half of what they were, 30 years ago. They did bump up a little bit during COVID. It's not really surprising, frankly, given the social dislocation that happened, but we're still running at very, very low levels compared to where things were. I mean, anyone who is older, a little bit older, who lived in cities 30 years ago knows how fundamentally different American cities are and how much safer they are than they were 30 years ago. This is new data just out from the FBI. This is the murder rate in the United States, came down last year. It's also come down this year with preliminary data. And you can see the murder rate is substantially lower than where it was in the late 70s and 80s and early 90s, right? So again, by historical standards, the country is far safer today than it was 30 years ago. The murder rates are far lower. Yes, we had a bump up during COVID. Again, not a big surprise. But also in terms of our domestic discourse, the murder rate, right, is much higher in Republican states and Trump voting states than it is in Democratic states. And this effort they have to try to paint Democratic areas as being unsafe and barbaric and no-go zones and everything else, you're far more likely to be murdered in a Republican state than in a Democratic state. I mean, it's just, again, one of these false memes that the Republicans are putting into our discourse every day. And on immigration, one of the big arguments is that we're for open borders. During the Obama-Biden administration, we actually had fewer undocumented immigrants in the United States than at the end of their term than at the beginning. And obviously, Biden is now struggling with what is unprecedented migration coming from a whole host of reasons that we can discuss. But this idea that we have been historically in this place for open borders is absurd. And so let's talk about how we're doing in America, right? I mean, let's just look at this list for a second. We are doing really well. I mean, the country has made enormous progress in recent years. I'm really proud of my president, proud of my party, proud of the American people for having gotten through a really tough patch in a very noble and inspiring way. We're kicking ass here in the United States, and I'm really excited about where we're headed. And remember, all this progress that I just went through, lowest unemployment rate, booming stock market, right? We're seeing wages and incomes go up. We saw wealth go up, has happened at a time where we've also seen mass migration. So Trump's argument was all these people that have come into the country have made things far worse, but we have the strong economy, lower crime rates, right? All these measures of societal health are all better than they were before. And it's in my view, it's because of immigration, not in spite of it, that the role of immigrants in our society to bring health, vitality, entrepreneurship into America has been essential. And this is something that Democrats have to defend and not shy away from. We know that public polling on immigration has gotten much better. And even in 2016, the exit polls, when Trump won, the exit polls had a simple question for Americans, which is, do you think the undocumented immigrants should stay or go? 70% said stay, 25% said go, right? So there's never been a hugely, the anti-immigrant position, the Trump position on immigration has never been up into the 40s, ever at any point. We are still a good-hearted and generous and nation when regarding immigration. And we also know that on globalization, this issue of our connectedness to the rest of the world, Democrats remain very open to liberal trade and the global liberal order that our party built back starting in the 1940s. It's the Republicans who become anti-immigrant and protectionist, right? Trump really fundamentally changed the party of Reagan to something being very different now. So by many measures, in life in America today is better than it's ever been. I mean, perhaps ever. I mean, we're living through a remarkable period. And it's happened while we have brought women and people of color in an unprecedented way into our workforce, right? When I was born, the country was, I was born into a segregated America. I mean, the country was 90% white and 10% Black, basically. And today we're 65% white, 35% people of color. Women have unprecedented economic opportunities. So we've seen all of the success happen at a time when we've also opened up the ladders of opportunity to people that didn't have them before. So it makes our success even more remarkable, I think, than we understand. But our success has not just been in governing, it's been in politics too. I'm going to go through this part quickly, because I talk about this a lot in my general hopium work. Since 1992, Democrats have won more votes in 7 out of 8 presidential elections. It's the best popular vote run by an American political party in our history. No political parties ever had this kind of run. If you notice, the Republicans have only broken above 48% one time during this entire period, while we are now, if you notice, we've now broken 50% 3 out of the last 4 elections. We had a great election in 2022, right? Despite high inflation and low Biden approval, we improved our standing in the battleground states. We picked up a Senate seat, state house, governorships. We kept the House close, which is prevented the Republicans from having ideological control over the House. We did better in the early vote. Our candidates dramatically outraised their opponents, right? And so we've seen that strong performance we had in 2022 continue throughout the country here in 2023. It's very encouraging. And if you look at party ID, you can see that during this period, this reflects the overall popular vote. The country's been much more Democrat than Republican during this period, for this period post-Cold War era. And so if I'm right about this, the people who came of age after 1989, that didn't know Reagan, that grew up in this post-Cold War period, and the world that they've known where Democrats have done well and Republicans haven't, then younger people today, people under 45 in their 40s and younger, should be more democratic. And that's exactly what you find. Young people used to be a jump ball in America. They were in the 90s and during the Bush era. But after the Iraq War, the war on terror, the rise of a new generation, millennials, the rise of Hispanics, Pete Lyon's on today. Pete and I wrote a whole article about this back in 2007 in Mother Jones. Younger Americans had been overwhelmingly and structurally Democratic, even with an older guy like Biden at the top of the ticket. This is very, very important as we head into 2024. And what's really important, if I can do one last stat here, is that, the last 4 elections, we've averaged 51% of the vote in America. The last time we did that was in the 1930s and 40s. So we are in not only a strong popular vote run, but at a presidential level, Democrats are now regularly breaking 51%. The last time we regularly broke 51% was all the way back during FDR's presidency. So we're doing well, everybody. The party is strong. We're united and strong. They're weak and divided. I feel good about where we are as we head into 2024. And one of the reasons we have to keep pushing our margins with young people is that people of these 2 much more liberal generations are becoming much more a bigger part of the electorate. And so this is a chart that is not good for Republicans, and we need to continue to press our advantage. And one of the things in my Get to 55 memo that's on Hopium, I show that if you take the 2020 election and keep everything constant and don't change anything, but only change one thing, which is you increase you adjust the under 45 vote and have it be equal to their population distribution, which is not a crazy thing, right? Democrats win by 10 points. And so the opportunity for us to gain enormously all across the country with younger voters is sitting there for us, and we need to take advantage. So despite all the success and everything I just showed you, right, we are continuing to underperform on the economy, and this really matters, right? Biden got beat, this is exit polls from 2020. Biden, Trump was vastly preferred on the economy. We won the election because we did better on COVID, which was a bigger issue. But Biden showed some structural weakness on the economy starting in the election, which has continued throughout his presidency. This is June of 2021. Where we're up 27 on COVID, 20 on healthcare, we're only up 4 on the economy, even though the economy was booming at this point. We saw this is now July of 2023. We're down to Republicans on the economy, inflation. All those charts, 48 out of 50 million jobs, everything I showed you, and yet Republicans who have been disastrous in their economic stewardship compared to us who've been repeatedly created growth and lower deficits, there's an impression in the American electorate that they're better at this stuff than we are. And it's a problem because it's wrong and it also matters. And so we've got to work to correct this. So let me just conclude and thank you for hanging out with me here today. When I talk to Democrats, I often now these days, particularly because the concept of freedom has become so central to our current narrative and discussion because of the illiberalism of MAGA, and they're taking away fundamental freedoms from people around, in the United States, that I go back to this sort of foundational speech in January of 1941. FDR laid out a world that he imagined after World War II that would be built not on top of dominion or autocracy or authoritarianism, but upon freedom. It was a very powerful vision, right? It was really a way of extending the great American experiment to the rest of the world. And he laid out these four freedoms, these very simple, I mean, think about how simple and elegant this construct is. Freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, freedom from fear. And these words became then core to the Atlantic Charter. They became in the United Nations Charter. They became the foundation of the Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. These four, this simple construct, written by FDR himself, by the way, we know that from history, in the speechwriting process for his State of the Union in 1941, that the whole modern world that we live in today is built upon these four freedoms. These are the foundations of the modern world. Everything that came after, right? World Bank, the IMF, NATO, everything, United Nations, it all flowed from this sort of basic theory that we were building a global system around freedom, not around dominion and authority and authoritarianism. And so look what's happened since FDR imagined this world, and the Democratic Party then went and built it and have maintained it and fought for it, in the years since. We've created a golden age in human history. There's never been a greater time to be alive in all of human history than it has been in this period after World War II. We've seen life expectancy explode all across the world. We've seen poverty reduced despite populations increasing dramatically all across the world. It's estimated that throughout most of history, 90% of people lived in extreme poverty, throughout most of human history. Today, we're down to very small levels. And also more people have lived under democracy than any time in human history. So this world that we imagined and built upon the four freedoms, was a world that has created more opportunity for more people than any other political system in the history of the world. And it's why what I like to say to Democrats is that, we're really part of what may be the single most important political movement in human history, that we have created a time in the world where more people have been able to do and to achieve their dreams than any other time in human history. And we should be loud and proud about this. I mean, this is my list of the things that we've achieved. It's an extraordinary legacy. We need to lean into it far more. And in the older presentation, I would sort of stop here. But then I added this next slide, which is that it's now no longer true that the Republican Party just hasn't done its part during this period. They've also descended into something deeply malevolent and dangerous. And I think it's something we can't look away from. I mean, you've seen it play out over the last few months. Tuberville's blockade of the Pentagon, Rand Paul's blockade of the State Department, including 38 ambassadors, including most of our ambassadors in the Middle East. The effort to disrupt the House and turn off the House of Representatives in a time of crisis. Trump's just daily Trump, right? That this has become a dangerous political party in America, not just the other political party. So we've done good. They haven't done their part, but now they've not only just not done their part, they've descended into something illiberal, dark, and dangerous. And so when people talk about what's gone wrong with America, what I'd like to say to everybody here is that, it's not, we have to remember this, right? I mean, it's one party that's been there plugging away, moving things forward, and when they've been in power, another party hasn't. And it's not, Washington isn't broken or politics isn't broken. It's what used to be called the Republican Party that's broken. It's not America that's in decline. It's one of our two political parties. America's prospered when we've been in charge, right, as we are now. And so we can't allow this kind of effort to create this both-siderism here. There isn't two sides to this. There's one good political party and one dangerous party, and we have to do everything we can to resist the kind of a false equivalency, because this kind of left and right jargon obscures our success and obscures their failures, and we have to reject it at all costs. And if we also just need us for a second, just remind ourselves about what they have become. Bear with me here. Thanks, everybody. Join me in being loud and proud about the good works of the Democratic Party. I'm really proud of my president and proud of my party. We're part of the arguably among the most noble political projects in all of human history. We need to pull on that history to inspire us to fight the battle that we're in now to make sure that freedom and democracy prevails here and everywhere. We were called once before as Democrats, we're being called again. And just to remind everybody, you know, if you haven't been to the FDR Memorial, it's one of my most inspirational places. This is from the wall on the FDR Memorial, these powerful, probably the most important political speech ever given in American English. And please join me on Substack, Hopium Chronicles. Thanks everybody so much. Let me open it up for questions, comments. Let me just go to the Q&A. Let me just jump into the Q&A thing here and see what people are saying. And thanks for everybody letting me. I've had some technical issues today with my computer. Beautiful graphic. By the way, I just want to say I don't take questions from anonymous folks, just as a general rule. If you want to be in here, you gotta be yourself. Yeah, I mean, Gilda talks about, you know, how we have to challenge this notion of Republicans being better on the economy. If you're part of my Hopium community, you know this is a central part of what we talk about there. And I have many of the slides and data you've seen here, which were developed for this, live also in various forms over at Hopium. Sorry about, there's construction on my street, which just, I guess lunch hour just ended. And so, you know, as if you hear, you know, what I talk about at Hopium is that the central political project of the Democratic Party now is that we have to get into positive territory with Republicans on the economy. We have to win the economic argument with them. I'm doing my best to arm all of you with data and sources to help you do that. And my view is the way we're going to do this is not only the Biden campaign and all the campaigns that we're going to run, but it's also, we have 2 or 3 million proud patriots every day wired together, singing from the same hymnal, talking about the good works of Joe Biden, the Democratic Party. We can be very, very loud. I think we have more agency in taking back control over our discourse than people understand. And I think it's why I talk about this concept of being an information warrior for your democracy is not only doing the work you need to do to win elections, which we've gotten very good at, but also engaging in the daily discourse. And I tell the story that, you know, Tucker Carlson in his heyday, who was the most influential commentator in America, had 3 million viewers a night on Fox. Imagine if 1 million people who are wired together, you know, networked around this information, reach 10 people each every day. That's 10 million people. That's 3 times as many as Tucker reached. And so I think the critical thing that I want to flip it on everybody, which is not talk about the Democratic messaging problem and Joe Biden. What can you do to help advance this story that I'm telling here today about the good works of the Democrats in your networks, in your communities? I mean, I think this is like a victory garden during World War II, right? We all have to do our part here to challenge the Republican dominance over our daily discourse, which is something that they built over a long period of time through massive investments in Fox News and in other vehicles. And so we're at a deficit. We're behind in that regard. But I think in addition to things like Pod Save America and Midas Touch and Courier Newsroom and Resolute Square and Deep State Radio and things like Hopium, you know, my belief is the way this is really going to happen is if millions of Americans decide they're going to become information warriors for their democracy. I think to me, it's the way that we really win. And by the way, this presentation will be up on the site later today. There will be many of the core charts and graphs will be there with it. So if you want to use them in your own work, just please always credit Hopium if you can. Yeah, look, the questions about Louisiana, Tennessee, look, we can't win every election. I mean, we're not going to win. It's like a playoff game, where, you have to get to 4, you're going to lose some along the way. And at the end of the day, the hard reality of all this is that the states that have gone from Republican to Democrat, like Virginia and in Georgia, for example, recently, hopefully North Carolina this cycle, it's been the people in the state itself that took responsibility to do it. There's no magic wand, there's no Harry Potter formula other than people in states at the end of the day are going to have to take responsibility for getting out the vote, recruiting good candidates, because there isn't a national thing going into Louisiana, for example, and recruiting people and pulling them up. That's just not how our system works. We have a decentralized political system. And, people ask me what happened in Louisiana. Well, we're not going to win every election, and it's possible we didn't have a great candidate, right? We didn't win everywhere in 2022, but we won in most places, and we're winning in most places this year. And our average, in the special elections all around the country, we're averaging 8 points better than 2020. It's very encouraging. But, for states like Tennessee and Louisiana and places that are struggling, there's no cavalry that's going to come here. I mean, it's going to be up to the leaders in the state to organize themselves as best they can, have incremental victories every 2 years. It's what happened in Georgia and Arizona. I mean, they had long-term plans to keep having incremental victories every 2 years, building on their success. There isn't any kind of, Harry Potter wand or Hermione's purse, right, that we're going to be able to go pull into and fix all this. It's hard, grinding work. I mean, I've been at this for more than 30 years, and I've had a lot of wins, and particularly recently, and a lot of devastating losses, and it's part of our system. But things are going in the right direction. I feel good right now about where we are as Democrats, but there are places we need to do better in. And I think my own view is that Biden's economic agenda is going to give us a lot to sell into red-leaning parts of the country. A majority of the investment that's been made under Biden for example, the manufacturing that I showed you is in places that have below average numbers of people with college degrees, right? And so, and so I think that like with FDR, these kind of massive investments we're making in places that have been left behind or places that we've struggled to reach is going to be an opening, hopefully, to give us a second look for some people who had written us off. And that's my, that's my belief. Let me go to Pete. Pete, let me call on you here. I think I can call on you, Pete. Pete, jump in here.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, Pete. Good to see you, brother.
Hey, good to see you. Love the latest update. I check in every so often to see the latest data and the argument as it keeps progressing. It's awesome. But one thing I wanted to just throw out there as another dimension of your kind of story, which if you had a full hour to do, would be to take kind of blue-dominated states against red-dominated states. Like Gavin's doing this a lot out here now in California. It's like, hey, look at what California is doing and comparing it to Florida or Texas. I mean, I think if you went head-to-head of like, hey, these are the laboratories of democracy. Here's the kind of blue version with supermajorities and all elected officials at the top of the state, blue, California, and here's what you got in Texas, and kind of look at the numbers there of, what kind of companies are there? What's the actually economic success of it? What's, everything else? You did a little bit about that with the murder rate across all red and blue states and stuff. But, I would also take, Minnesota just went, had a trifecta against Wisconsin, right over the border. Or, you could see New York and Florida, or you could see, I don't know, maybe Illinois with Atlanta or with Georgia or something. Anyhow, it'd be an interesting way to take this to the next level of where going forward, the kind of vision that a blue state's trying to lay out here could come to all America, and whereas the red state version is going to drag us down. I know it's implicit in what you're saying, but it'd be interesting to see the data on that. I don't have all that data, but it'd be really
it's an interesting thing. Gavin, when he was in Los Angeles, I'm in touch with Gavin, and for those of you who are part of Hopium, Gavin's a Hopium subscriber and sends me notes my posts from time to time. Pete knows I've known Gavin for a long time, since before he
Yeah.
was mayor of San Francisco, right? We've been friends. He used some of his arguments that he made on television when he was in Los Angeles at the second Republican debate were stuff from this deck, right? He used the 48 million out
I
of 50
saw
million.
that.
He used,
I saw that.
yeah, no, it was great. And I sent him a note afterwards, thanking him for implicitly promoting Hopium with us. I will look into that, Pete. The challenge is, this deck's a little long and I'm trying not to add stuff. And but I will look into it. I think the other point about what you're getting at is that where you're going to start to see very profound differences between red and blue states is going to be on things like maternal and child health outcomes, access to OBGYN services. There's going to be an abortion dimension to this, or a reproductive health dimension to this, that is quickly going to become terrifying, because we already have some of the highest maternal death rates in the developed world, and those are all going to start going in the wrong direction profoundly, particularly in places that have the most significant abortion restrictions. And so, in addition to the economic, because I think the data, and I don't have this at my fingertips, but the blue states are 65% of GDP, the red states are 35% of GDP, give or take, right? I mean, there's a massive, or blue counties. It's Ron Brownstein writes about this a lot. Blue counties represent about 65% of overall output in America, and red counties represent about 35%. Blue states are much more net producers of income for the federal government. Red states are much more net takers of federal resources. And so, yeah, look, I mean, what's amazing about this presentation, and one of the reasons I do it so often is it's like working out for me, and I have to think through all this stuff, and I have to present it, so I have to understand it, and it causes me to go spend time back with the data. And as you know, Pete, as somebody who's been writing and commenting for decades, when you do that, sometimes you see things differently, right? You go back to something that you hadn't really thought about in a while. And this deck for me is like a big restorative fountain that I jump into, right? Like I go in, I live in it for a few days as I prep, I play around with it, and it rejuvenates my thinking about a lot of this stuff. And but this fundamental reality here, the contrast between our performance over a long period of time and their performance is so extreme that we have to have the courage and the power and the willingness to fight against this fundamental orientation of our political discourse, which is the left and right are the same. They're two sides of one coin. It's like what Tom Binder and I fought with the red wave. It was these false narratives, and we have to have more confidence and courage to sort of take this stuff on. I mean, what Tom Binder and I did in 2022 by challenging the red wave was not easy. I mean, we got ridiculed, attacked by really important people in the media. I had a very prominent MSNBC contributor call me a conspiracy theorist on national television, right? And of course they were all wrong and we were right. And I think that one of my big projects here, and the reason I really founded Hopium, was that I want to help hundreds of thousands, millions of Democrats understand the stuff the way that I do, so that we can then use these arguments to change the understanding of America about itself. Because at the end of the day, I'm going on too long here, but it's my belief that the central project of MAGA has been to put negative discourse, negative sentiment into our discourse. They want us to feel bad about our country, our democracy, our leaders, our institutions, each other. And part of the way we overcome MAGA is that we have to be given permission to love our country again, right? We have to come at their negative sentiment with positive sentiment, and to celebrate the incredible progress we've made. This is the greatest country on earth. In many ways, we're greater than we've ever been. And we're being tested now, both within and from without. And the key now is that we have to use our success as this fuel for the engine of our work. Because the way we defeat MAGA and the way we defeated liberalism, it's critical for extremists. Extremists have to establish that the system has failed in order for them to take power. If we've been successful as a nation, there's no MAGA. right? MAGA has no argument. There's no rationale for MAGA. And we have been successful as a nation. The fact that we don't know it is a tragedy, because I want the kids growing up in America to be as proud of their country as I was when I was growing up. And one of the most important things we can do as older people who are here today is we have an obligation to create a narrative and a story about the United States that allows younger Americans to love their country the way that we did. And I think this has been a collective failure, frankly, by those of us who are no longer young. And it's something we've got to be, take very seriously, because we're going to lose our country through narratives more than we are, potentially more than we are over anything else. And we're behind in the narrative game. I do think that Biden is finding his voice on this stuff in a very powerful way. I think the democracy speech he gave a few weeks ago, the speeches he's been giving in Israel, the speech he's going to speak to the nation tonight, all of you should watch. I think he's really finding his voice, and we're seeing what are sort of the apex, the apogee, the zenith of Bidenism here, right? Where he's really putting all these pieces together, connecting dots, and making it very clear that, we're in a fight, as the Democratic Party's been before, we're in a pretty consequential fight for freedom and democracy here and everywhere. And part of what I'm trying to do at Hopium, Pete, and I've given you a very long answer to your short question, is that I don't think we really understand in many ways the nature of the conflict that we're really in today. A lot of it does operate in the information space, as we saw over the last 10 days around Israel. And I'm trying to help to arm Americans, in essence, with powerful tools to become more effective information warriors in their democracy and all around the world. So Susan just mentioned that the DNC is also now starting to develop, important tools, which I've written about at Hopium. They've got this Reach tool, which everyone should check out. Thank you, Susan, for raising that. And I have written about this quite extensively at Hopium. The DNC is they're testing ways of helping create more capacity in the information space for Democrats. And I think so far I haven't used Reach yet, but the people that have been pleased with it in its early days. Remember, this is a new app. It's going to be bumpy in the early days, right? And so then finally, let me address one other question. Thank you, Pete. I'm going to put you back into.
Well, good. Keep it up. The good work rate. Yeah,
thanks, man.
For sure.
Okay. Let me go back into this. Bobby mentioned that I needed to stay a little bit longer on each slide. I actually don't want to do that. And the reason why is that what I want to do in this presentation, Pete actually taught me a lot about how to give presentations. And so the density of this presentation in part is Pete's fault. I'm just going to tell you that right now. These presentations are meant to tickle your appetite. They're meant to intrigue you. They're meant to create a thing where you leave and be like, man, I got to learn more. I need to understand. I'm not trying to solve all the problems of the world. I don't want to spend more time. I want to give you this broad overview of things, throw a lot of stuff out you, challenge you to absorb it all, come back to the material later. When you read a newspaper article about wages, right? Was Simon right about this? So I'm purposely throwing a lot at you and leaving a lot of the next steps for you to do. And as Susan knows, who's very active in Hopium, that one of the things I talk about at Hopium is that I'm very aware that my role is, I don't want to give people talking points. I don't want to tell you what to think or believe. What I want to do is give you more information and more understandings that make you more effective at engaging in the world in whatever way you engage. Because as somebody mentioned, the most powerful part of communication is passion. It's intensity. It's the ability to know your material. It's not the ability to parrot or mimic talking points that you don't understand, right? And I think that as somebody who worked in the war room, part of my job in 1992 was to educate the 31 states. We had 31 battleground states in 92 compared to 6 or 7. It's a completely different world. But I helped the campaigns understand Clinton's arguments. I educated our campaign staff, our surrogates, to make them more effective communicators. And yes, we used talking points, and the Clinton campaign invented the concept of talking points in 1992. But it was not to parrot, it was not to mimic, it was to help create greater understanding. And so anyway, I'm I could go on longer. Let me just say thanks to everybody. We've hit time. This will be up. Please share it. You know, if you think other people you know want to see it, it's going to be both up on YouTube and on the Hopium site. Powerful stuff here. There, when you go and look at it, there are going to be lots of links underneath for things to read about. And some of the core charts and graphs will be up here. If you have suggestions about how to make it better, you know, come to Hopium and, you know, give it there. It's the easiest way to engage. But anyway, thanks everybody. I mean, this is a very, very consequential time in our history. I'm grateful that all of you are taking time out of your day, frankly, to spend time talking about the future of our country, where we've gone and where we need to go. And also just a pitch for Virginia. I mean, I put out a memo today about the need to really lean into Virginia. It's very close there. We need to win there. We got to keep our momentum going. And so if you have any extra time or money in this final 2.5 weeks, I want to encourage you to participate in Virginia in whatever way you can. It really matters. And so thanks all. Keep the faith and keep spreading Hopium. Take care.